Hi, my name is Adee. So, a little bit about myself. I came to the US I'm originally from India. So I did my high school there, and then I did my college there. And then when I was 22, I came to the US for a PhD in computer science. And I did that for 2 years. I realized I didn't enjoy, I like math and I like quantitative stuff, but I'm not a fan of just academic research without specific results. So I decided to start working. I work in the financial industry, so basically I push money around, but I enjoy that. It's fairly quantitative, and so that's about me. But I think what would be more interesting is as I grew up, my dad used to live in different places. So my dad used to work in Saudi Arabia for a few years. He used to work in Singapore for a few years. And as a result of that, I enjoy traveling. So I've managed to travel to a lot of countries in Asia. I've done Europe and South America too a little bit, but I don't think it's as interesting as Asia from the point of view of people here. So I thought I would talk about that a little bit. So my dad used to work in Saudi Arabia in the early to mid 90s. So 92 to 95 or 96. And it's a very interesting society. It's a society which was pretty much broke 60 or 70 years ago. The only reason it exists is because of what is on the ground, and the per capita wealth is fantastic. And what is even more interesting is it's an entire society where nobody works, so there are no taxes, and the education of the population is very few people go to college. In college they basically learn the Quran, so it's probably interesting to them, but it's not really practical in terms of solving problems in the world. So it's kind of I would say it was an experience. It's a very controlled society, but a lot of the control seems to be from outside, from the religious people. Because, like for example, my dad had a boss, and over time, they got to know each other pretty well, and they became friends. And on the outside, his boss and his wife, they look like everyone else. It's very strict. Women have to be fully covered. They cannot drive, and you cannot be caught talking to a woman apart from your mother or sister, in public. But interestingly, one day they called us to their house for dinner, and we went to their house, and it was a very nice house, and they're quite wealthy because they had 6 TVs, nice drawing room, and then you take them and they take off their abaya, which is basically the black dress, and she's basically dressed in like any other woman anywhere, and very friendly, and basically you just have normal people trying to live their life, and a lot of that is constrained because of the religious and kind of the kingdom and kind of external forces. So I think what I took away from that experience was people are pretty much the same, except that outside societal structures lead to weird outcomes or results. I've traveled, so that is Saudi Arabia. I've traveled extensively through India. India is very strange because India is something like the EU or Africa. It's a huge country, almost the size of a continent, and different parts are very different in terms of race, in terms of language, in terms of food, in terms of climate. You can go up to the north, to the Himalayas, and the whole place is at 15,000 feet, and people yaks and yak butter and Buddhism, and it's a very different religion and the way of life compared to the south, which is hot and subtropical and closer to kind of life in Sri Lanka or tropical climate. And I think it's interesting because I guess there are a lot of these superficial differences between people in terms of how they look, how they talk, and all that. But effectively, everyone kind of wants very similar things. And another experience was traveling in China. Okay, I've done Singapore and the Middle East. Singapore, my dad was in Singapore for a few years. Singapore is very similar to Saudi Arabia, but with leadership which is actually smart. Because Singapore has no religious freedom. Not religious freedom, it has no personal freedom. For example, you can't chew gum or you can't do any of those things in that country. But the readers realize that the key to having a successful economy is having educated people who are motivated, and that's exactly what the country tries to encourage. And I've been in Malaysia. Malaysia is a lot of fun. It's kind of a little bit chilled out. There are golf courses everywhere because grass grows naturally, so you just have to cut it off when you have a golf course. Been to China. China is strange. It's shocking because China and India gets started kind of the same place, but in terms of infrastructure, China is so far ahead. I was in Shanghai, and you look at Shanghai, it looks like New York City or Singapore. But it disappears very quickly once you go into the countryside, because I went to this small town called Xi'an, which is where you have the hidden soldiers and the hidden warriors, and there nobody speaks English, and people are poor, and so you can see that there's a lot of development, but there's also massive inequality, and I think that's something that they need to resolve in the future if they want to continue developing. Or you're going to have another French Revolution, and all the elite are going to get their heads cut off. So that was my experience with traveling. I've done Europe. All the main cities. Frankly, I don't think Europe is not as interesting as traveling in Middle East or Asia, simply because it's so homogeneous, or more homogeneous compared to the US. And if you live in the US and you travel in Europe, you can get McDonald's, everything works, everything runs on time, and it's a little bit of a cultural experience, but it's not as interesting. Okay, thank you. I think I've rambled a bit, but I hope it was instructive and fun to hear.
Thank you, Adee. We look forward to you elaborating on all your stories.
Okay.
And I will have to join.
Okay.